There's reports that Iran is destabilizing. It sounds like there were some Mossad agents that were killed inside Iran. Is this Israel messing with the interior politics of Iran? Is this a precursor to war? What's going on here, Lucas?
I would say it's assuredly a result of Israel interfering with internal politics inside Iran. There are other there are some reasons for unrest in Iran. We hear about from Donald Trump and American politicians about concern for violence against protesters. Maybe that's projection for things that are happening inside the United States. I think the actual legitimate or the concerns of Iranians are feeling have to do with inflation. And part of the reason of that inflation is that the suppressed cost of gas for heating and for their cars has been incredibly low, like below $1 a gallon for some time in Iran. But as they are faced with security threats from Israel, harkening back to the 12-day war in 2025, in the summer of 2025, between Israel and Iran, Iran has been preparing for that conflict to continue. And as far as Israel is as far, from their vantage, one, they have thought that Iran is the linchpin in the resistance against their presence in the region, and have done everything that that they could for several decades now to stoke a war and to end the regime inside Iran. And they begged for the ceasefire to end the 12-day war.
And if I recall, the end of the 12-day war, it seemed like it coincided with Israel running out of munitions. That almost wanted to pause because they ran out of missiles.
Well, and we know that it certainly, and they were surprised at how effective Iran's missiles were against their defense systems, their Iron Dome and David Sling that they had, that they thought would give them more protection against Iran missiles. They did not.
Well, sticking on missiles for just a second. So we did hear from Russia that they fired one of their most sophisticated missiles into the Ukraine, actually had a live payload. Is Iran demonstrating, or were they demonstrating similar style of technology?
Iran does have hypersonic missiles. I'm not sure if they are as fast, or that they have the warhead that splits into 6 different missiles that Russia's Oreshnik has, but they do have hypersonic missiles. Those were some of the missiles that they used to take out key elements of Israel's defense, and also to strike a military base inside Israel. They even, just like the Russians have done.
Well, so the question that comes to my mind initially is this Israel trying to attack Iran from within because their 12-day war was unsuccessful? So now they're trying internal destabilization of the country to try to win a quiet war?
Well, if you go back to the 12-day war, it started with an internal attack to begin with. They had many Mossad agents and other saboteurs that they had paid off, that were Pakistani or from India, that there was coordination with to disable Iran's anti-aircraft defense systems and other defense systems inside Iran. Iran has since then deported. I mean, we talk about deportations here in the United States. We've deported a couple of thousand. In Iran, they deported millions of Pakistanis, Baluchistanis, in the wake of this 12-day war. Even, after the start of it, they were rounding up foreign nationals and deporting them out of Iran to abate the security concerns there. So there's that element of the tactics that Israel used previously, and yes, we can imagine that they are engaging in the same tactics. But let's go back to the end of this conflict. Um, I had suspicions that Israel had threatened, as they got to the end of their rope with conventional weapons, that they had threatened to use their nuclear weapons. And they have something called Samson that they call the Samson option, which is they will tear the temple of the world down around them without respect to to, to the destruction that would mean for Israel. And apparently, they had communicated to the United States that if the United States did not intercede on their behalf, that they were prepared to use their nuclear options. And though their nuclear weapons but they have deployed into submarines, and the United States nor Iran knows where those submarines are. Um, but Israel's last resort is the use of their nuclear weapons. And and it was the invocation of that led to the United States sort of dummy attack on the Iranian nuclear base, Fordham, and Israel has since then been trying to rebuild and to not to rebuild, but to reamass their missiles with which to attack Iran. And if we can imagine that they're not as prepared as they were going into the first battle. So I would imagine that they were leaning very heavily on what options they had to try to uh, f- create destabilization within the country and possibly to incite the Iranian people against their leader, Khamenei, and and force some sort of regime change there. I don't think it's going to work. Now, here in the United States, we've seen reports that thousands and thousands, some numbers high as 10,000 Iranians have been killed in putting down these protests from within Iran. And my favorite source is Nima Axelrod or Akhorshid. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but he's the host of Dialogue Works. He usually lives in Brazil. I listen to his show um, daily. And Nima is an expatriated Iranian who's happened to be back in Iran for the holidays, and has been reporting with what's been occurring within Iran whenever he gets a chance. And he stated quite flatly since we first heard about this that the reports of these protests were greatly exaggerated, and I find him to be very
Well,
credible.
that's because that's what we're seeing externally is that the country looks like it's being destabilized from this internal protests that are happening. These protests are not genuine. These are some manufactured thing that Mossad is trying to stir up inside of Iran.
Well, I would say that the protests, in part, are genuine. Going back to concerns about inflation, going back to tensions. I mean, we see a couple of deportations here, and look at the political effect that they have. So there are tensions within Iran. But the question I think that we should focus on is, or as Americans who are interested, or who are trying to be, who other states are trying to draw into the war, is are they being amplified artificially? And I think that's the case here. Now, another measure that Iran has taken was to turn off the internet because they wanted to forestall. Ostensibly, they wanted to forestall this amplification, artificial amplification. What do I mean there? I mean having a lot of people poised to focus on demonstrations that are occurring in a country of 90 million people. You get a couple of thousand out on the street and say this is going on everywhere. So in order to cut that tool off from foreign states, Israel, from communicating that sort of false impression of what's going on with Iran, they have turned off the internet inside Iran. And uh, an interesting element to add to that is the presence of Starlink in Iran. And so some people who have Elon Musk's satellite internet, Starlink, were able to transmit. were able to, transmit uh, media that they wanted from inside of Iran out into the world. And I think we should also be guarded with regards to what we accept as reality from that's been transmitted on Starlink. And I say that because Elon Musk has cards, has considerations and alliances, allegiances to various players in this game. And not only that, the those who might have access to Starlink technology, money to pay for it, might be a very different group than the general cut of Iranians inside the country.
Well, I mean, it's not that expensive. I suppose really what it comes down to is smuggling that dish inside of the country, and then is has Musk said anything about whether he's stopping traffic from the satellites? Because you have to register where those things are located at. I don't think they just work anywhere. So they know if the traffic is being generated from within Iran.
Well, I think Musk is very glad to, and maybe has a narrative of neutrality on his part with regards to use of Starlink from within Iran. Um, but um, one I look back to the use of Starlink inside Ukraine, the conflict going on in Ukraine, and how um, uh, a relationship with Starlink has allowed Ukraine um, to continue its battle with Russia, and how not neutral um, Starlink's presence in Ukraine has been. I look at the use of Starlink going back to the Iran the 12-day war back in June. The use of Starlink for communication during that 12-day war that bypassed um, uh, Iran's network monitoring on their regular internet. And I also have to think to myself, well, if Starlink is in Iran and in Ukraine, is it in Gaza? No, it's not. And so I think Elon Musk has allegiances that we should consider, and we should question the information that we're receiving from that network whenever we consider um, who's using Starlink and to what ends they are using Starlink.
So the information itself in Iran still tightly controlled. Starlink is getting some amount of information out. Why is this critical to the war? I mean, I'm not sure why this is the critical thing that we need to think about when we're considering the tensions between Iran and Israel. Like they've had an embargo on the internet in various different ways that Iran has tried to control the flow of information. Is it because this is a new attack vector in a way that they can help to destabilize the country? Is just having a more free flow of information that's sympathetic to whatever Israel's trying to accomplish here?
I think it's critical because Israel does not have the capability to defeat Iran through force, through their missiles, um, through uh, through any sort of attack with their army. Um, a physical attack on Iran. So what do they rely on? They rely on information warfare, and they also rely on assistance from other countries, whether those countries are likely to be in Western Europe, um, the United States, or India. But Israel needs to control the narrative and to get um, and to get their version of events out to those possible allies with regards to what's happening in Iran, in order to sustain this conflict. And 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 because because of the devastation of their missile capabilities, their military capabilities following the 12-day war, um, the their reliance on partners is even greater than before. And meanwhile, um, their strength and security as an independent nation is much lessened by the um, by the strikes that Iran made against them back in the 12-day war. So um, they are
Well, one thing that's coming to my mind when we keep thinking about this renewed hot war between Israel and Iran, if they're going to start lobbing these hypersonic missiles, just the silver demand. I know that this was something that I saw back in 2023 when we first started hearing about hypersonic missiles, when we first started talking about it, about like exactly how much and where do we use silver. If this starts up again with the price of silver where it's at and what's happening in the silver market, I wonder if there's going to be some additional concerns here, or if this could spark the next run in the silver market. Not that we're talking about the silver situation particularly, but seeing silver at fresh highs and then thinking about what this might mean, there might be something there to really consider.
absolutely. I saw that the Shanghai Exchange was then able to make physical deliveries and pushed back the physical deliveries of their silver. And I would say that this is a type of technology that that since being demonstrated in the 12-day war, since being demonstrated by the now two aggression strikes in the Ukraine by Russia in the last year. Um, uh, I would guess anybody who's not jumping on a search for hypersonic missiles is going to be left in the dark ages in the post what are we calling it now, the post Pax Americana world that we're moving into. And bearing that in mind, what's going on in America? We had Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Zelensky fly to meet Trump now 3 weeks ago on the same Friday, and hold separate meetings uh, consecutively with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Miami. Um, and immediately after that, the United States struck Venezuela and abducted Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela. There has been, uh, that break from international norms has been been has led to ripple effects with as other sovereign countries around the world absorb the new tack that the United States is taking. Meanwhile, we have a flare up in in the domestic peace situation here in the United States. Um, and that largely centered around the ICE deportation efforts by the federal government. Um, and also, immediately on the heels of the abduction of Nicolas Maduro, Trump Trump began making statements about both Venezuela and Canada, and now and the United States also has been uh, uh, making moves towards strikes on ostensibly cartels, whoever it may be in Mexico. So where does Iran and Israel fit into all of this? One, I think if we turn back and think about Iran's response to and vulnerability from foreign nationals that were residing within their borders, and then we flash back to the United States and see that the Americana is failing, paying off people to participate in our global economy is failing, that the Trump administration had fears about um, destabilization efforts from within the country. So, despite the humanitarian or the liberal concerns about about these deportations, we can maybe begin to see a reason why the Trump administration has been so adamant in enforcing them. Um, when I think about maybe why Benjamin Netanyahu had came to have a meeting with Donald Trump, it was because they also were reading the tea leaves and thought that the United States was focusing domestically on their problems, and bringing their international focus closer to or over to the Western Hemisphere and might forget them. So I'm not sure what the United States response or involvement is going to be in this Middle East conflict. And also going back to, how did the 12-day war end? It ended with the intercession by the United States on the heels of a threat by Israel to the United States that they were going to uh, resort to their nuclear option. So I've wondered how much success the United States will have in either politically or militarily neutralizing Israel's ability to use nuclear weapons in the future. And I think the options that the Trump administration are going to have um, in pursuing our conflicts on our southern and northern borders are going to be contingent on how they are forced or not forced to participate in Israel's conflict with Iran.
Because as far as it being brought to a close, there was never any involvement directly with the United States. I mean, it was sort of diplomatic. So, or did I mean, isn't that's the way I recalled it, that the US really didn't have much to do to particularly help diffuse the tensions. I know that there was a lot of bluster from Trump that he was going to help end it through diplomatic talks and whatever, but it just seemed like Israel ran out of munitions and then cried uncle, asked for a cease of the hostilities, and Iran complied. Why they didn't pursue it further, it was a little surprising to me.
Cried Uncle Sam. No, the United States had
Well,
ships.
cried uncle is like, well, we're out of missiles. We can't keep firing back. And like, if you keep shelling us, we're going to be out of missiles. We got to use our nuclear weapons. And then, if I'm not sure exactly what the U.S. did to get Iran to stand down, but I mean, I guess they didn't want to get hit by a nuclear weapon.
Going back to the conflict, the United States both had ships in the Persian Gulf um, that were that were launching interceptor missiles at Iran's ballistic
But
missiles.
they were kind of sitting ducks for the hypersonic missiles. I
Well,
mean,
but Iran, a large number of Iran's missiles that they fired were not hypersonic. They used the hypersonic missiles to take out key defensive elements in Israel. They did not fire on American ships in the Persian Gulf, and then they used their older missiles to um, uh, once the defense systems were compromised to hit targets in Tel Aviv and military bases in Israel. Um, but by and large, the majority of those missiles were not hypersonic. I only think they used a couple of hypersonic missiles during that. But the United States was also supplying Israel with more missiles for their defense, and the United States used up something like 7 or 12 years worth of production of Patriot missiles. um, they uh, they took some of of those Patriot missiles from Ukraine and took them and sent them to Israel for Israel to use in their defense against Iran. So I think also the United States' own stockpile of missiles was part of the consideration. Now, how did this stop? I think that we can. Um, I think there was communication between the Trump administration and Iran, because remember there was that we were surprised here in the United States with the strike on the nuclear bases, the two strikes Fordham, and I forget what the other was, by the B-2 bombers, from
But then that turned out to be like it probably wasn't their nuclear facilities. I remember that being we discussed and it was in the news that this was the actual nuclear sites, but then Iran said, "Well, we'd actually moved our nuclear sites somewhere else," and it seemed like they had done that for show because they hit targets that
yes,
they were willing
for
to throw up.
show, but it neutralized the Israeli demand, because they were confused and because they were ignorant of the coordination between the United States and Iran. Trump's line coming out of those strikes by the B-2 bombers on key nuclear sites within Iran was that the United States had obliterated um, uh, Iran's nuclear capability. And once he had established that as the prevailing narrative with what Iran's capability was, it removed um, the it removed the logical need for the United States to intercede on Israel's behalf, because to hear it from Benjamin Netanyahu, um, uh, the the nuclear capabilities, in which Iran is always 3 days from reaching, or 3 days, they're 3 days away from a nuclear bomb, despite
It yeah, for the last 10, 12, 20 years, something, I've seen these clips, it's good, they're kind of, humorous when we keep saying US politicians say, "Iran is a week away, they're 3 days away," is, kind of a funny trope.
Well, it's humorous, but it's maddening whenever we think that this still has political wheels. And I think this was part of Trump's calculation in saying, "Oh, it's not enough to turn to Tulsi Gabbard, or um, turn to the intelligence community for analysis with regards to what the reality of Iran's capabilities or their intention with regards to their nuclear program are, because there is such disagreement, and there are such strident supporters of Israel that exist within the American government, within the intelligence and um, military communities. And so, rather than try to engage in a rhetorical battle here, back in the United States, Trump gave into their pressure and then coordinated with the Iranians to alert them of where the strikes would be, when the strikes would be, and what sort of counter strike would be permissible for them. Because remember, the Iranians fired back at the United States base in Qatar, after those strikes, and then um, both sides relented, and Israel began to pick up the pieces. So that was a staged end to the conflict. um, but meanwhile, both sides were preparing for this artificial peace to end, and that's where we sit now. So I think we should also remember that the Israelis surprised Iran, with their attack, using those agents within the country to disable some of their defensive systems, and also using intelligence that they had gathered with the whereabouts of some of the generals in the Iranian, the RGC, in their military, to assassinate some of the leaders inside Iran, and they thought that that would be adequate. We also had reports that they tried to kill the supreme leader, the Khamenei, in Iran too. They failed in that regards. But understanding um, the disproportionate size, geographically and population wise, of Iran, Israel is trying to make targeted strikes into the leadership of Iran in order to have some chance of success. So the question I think that we should be also bearing in mind now, as this conflict ramps back up, is Iran going to make the preemptive strike this time, or are they going to wait for Israel to lash out? And I think that this is where the United States must also be exerting whatever diplomatic diplomatic power, or um, I don't even know how to phrase it. They must be, their concerns must be with regards to, is Iran going to lash out and um, and destroy Israel despite Israel's ability to resort to their nuclear weapons, because Iran is large enough to withstand those nuclear attacks, and might be thinking that rather than wait wait for possible regime change, terrorist operations, whatever else Israel might throw at them, rather than enduring that perpetual conflict, that it's best to destroy Israel in one great preemptive strike. And I think that's the question that is in the air now. And I think that Donald Trump has been tweeting with regards to the United States protecting the protesters, et cetera, et cetera. But that I think is just a front, um, a front that Donald Trump is is throwing out to to his domestic audience, to the Israeli audience, while meanwhile his true concern with Iran, the possibility of an Iranian grand and preemptive attack on Israel, and he's trying to convince them not to go down that path.
Well, we'll keep a close eye on it. So, takeaway, maybe a failed color revolution here in Iran. Watch for a repeat of a hot war, and we'll keep a close eye on it. We'll see you next time on FOMO.